Here's the math. A 1994 Ford F-150 in Louisiana presented with rod knock so severe the engine practically rattled at idle. 2 separate shops quoted complete rebuilds, $3,800 and $4,200. The owner rejected both. Instead, he spent $3. Not $3,000, $3. He used a zinc dialkyl dithiaphosphate boundary lubricant. It's a molecular bonding chemistry derived from zinc and phosphorus organics that physically fills in micro wear scars on bearing surfaces at operating temperature. Today, that truck is sitting at 310,000 miles, 0 knock, 0 internal engine work performed since that single application. A fleet of 14 construction trucks in Arizona had been chewing through engines at a catastrophic rate of 1 failure every 14 months. That's $5,800 per replacement. They were plagued by chronic cold start knock from years of sloppy, overdue oil changes. In 2014, the fleet manager started adding the exact same $3 chemistry to every routine service. 4 years later, not a single engine replaced. A 1987 Chevy pickup in rural Montana had pistons slapped so loud, every mechanic within a 40-mile radius had pronounced the block dead. 1 treatment. The knock vanished on the first drive, and that engine hasn't left the truck since Reagan was in office. A commercial fishing vessel out of Gloucester, Massachusetts, with documented bearing knock since 2009. Treated once, surveyed completely clean in 2022. None of these engines were lucky. Every single one of them utilized the exact same $3 chemistry that the United States military perfected in the 1950s. And it's the exact same chemistry that the $47 billion global engine repair industry has spent decades quietly stripping out of your motor oil. If you have ever been told your engine is ticking, if you have ever paid for an engine rebuild, or if you have been quoted $5,000 for a replacement block because a shop told you your bearings were shot, drop the word knock in the comments. Subscribe and hit the bell. Because what we're about to dig up will permanently change how you look at every oil change you ever pay for. Let's talk about what this $3 fix actually cost the people who never knew it existed. Not in theory. In documented, traceable dollars. Every 14 months, that fleet manager in Arizona was writing a check for $5,800. That was the price of 1 engine replacement on 1 construction truck. He had 14 of them, and they were all knocking. Cold start knock. The kind that comes from years of inconsistent oil changes, grinding metal against metal until the clearances open up and the bearings start screaming for mercy. Do the math with me. 1 engine replacement every 14 months across a fleet that size means roughly 1 failure per month across the operation. That is almost $70,000 a year in engine replacements alone. That doesn't count downtime. It doesn't count tow bills. It doesn't count the jobs those trucks missed while they sat on a lift bleeding oil. When he started adding a single $3 chemistry to every oil change in 2014, the annual spend on catastrophic engine failure plummeted from nearly $70,000 to $42 a year in additive costs. That is not a marginal improvement. That is a rounding error replacing a financial hemorrhage. Now, hold that number in your head, and let's rewind to 1952. Aberdeen Proving Ground is the U.S. Army's primary weapons and equipment testing installation in Maryland. Between 1949 and 1953, they ran a formal, highly classified lubrication research program. The problem was simple, but the constraints were brutal. Military vehicles in the field were developing severe engine knock. You can't do an engine out rebuild on a forward operating base. There are no machine shops, no replacement blocks, and no 6-week back orders on crankshaft bearings. The fix had to be chemical. It had to work inside the existing engine without turning a single wrench. And it had to be cheap enough to scale across hundreds of thousands of vehicles simultaneously. The chemistry they landed on was ZDDP, zinc dialkyl dithiaphosphate. Aberdeen's 1952 research records meticulously document knock elimination using ZDDP supplemented lubricants. No machining, no teardowns. The knock stopped, and the engines kept running. That research was eventually distributed to Ford, General Motors, and Chrysler under a post-war industrial cooperation framework. By 1955, every major American automaker had the data. By 1965, every serious drag racing operation and professional engine builder in motorsport knew exactly what ZDDP was and exactly what it did. NASCAR teams were quietly running it through the late 50s. But it never appeared in a single owner's manual. Not Ford, not GM, not Chrysler. Not one manual produced by an American manufacturer between 1955 and today has ever explicitly told a customer that this chemistry exists to save their dying engine. The chemistry that solved this problem cost the Army pennies per vehicle in 1952. It cost that Arizona fleet manager $3 per truck in 2014. Meanwhile, the industry that buried it collects $47 billion a year on the built-in assumption that engine wear is inevitable. Those two numbers, $3 and $47 billion, are not competing products. They are competing financial architectures, and only one of them was designed to keep you paying. You own the vehicle, you own the loan, you pay the insurance premium, the fuel cost, and the registration. But you do not own the information about what is actually happening inside your engine. That information sits behind a wall, and that wall was built with your money. The API certification process, the modern oil specification standards, the owner's manual language that sternly warns you against adding aftermarket chemicals to your oil, all of it was authored by corporations whose quarterly earnings depend on you replacing parts, replacing fluids, and eventually replacing the entire vehicle. You are not a customer in this ecosystem. You are a consumable. Your engine's wear schedule is someone else's income schedule, and they synchronized those on purpose. Here is exactly how the chemistry works and why your engine knocks in the first place. There are generally two types of knock you can treat. The first is clearance origin microwear. The second is carbon knock. Carbon knock happens when stubborn deposits accumulate on your piston crowns. This is incredibly common in modern direct injection engines and vehicles stuck in stop-start urban traffic with extended oil change intervals. These deposits create localized hotspots in the cylinder. Those hotspots pre-ignite the fuel before the spark plug even fires. That rogue mini-explosion collides with the normal combustion event and produces a sharp, audible knock. Carbon knock does not mean your bearings are leaving the chat. It just means your piston crowns are filthy. The detergent chemistry inside the same $3 additive solubilizes those deposits. It breaks them off the metal, suspends them harmlessly in the oil, and lets the filter catch them on the next pass. No hot spots, no pre-ignition, no knock. Clearance knock is different. That's actual metal wear. But ZDDP steps in by creating a sacrificial boundary layer. Under extreme heat and pressure, it physically bonds to the iron in your engine, essentially creating a microscopic layer of zinc iron phosphate glass. It literally fills the microscars where the metal has worn away, tightening those clearances back up and silencing the rattle. Two completely different failure modes, both resolved by a single treatment. A treatment that the industry specification process quietly began phasing out of your daily motor oil back in 1996. So, before you touch a bottle, before you spend a single cent, you need to know exactly what you're treating. Here is the diagnostic protocol. First, the idle test. Pull into your driveway after 15 minutes of real driving. Not idling in a drive-through, actual highway driving. Let the engine sit at operating temperature. Shift into neutral or park. Bring the RPM up to 2500 and hold it there for a slow count of 10. Just listen. If the knock gets louder as the revs climb, if it's louder under acceleration than when you're just cruising, that sound is clearance origin microwear. That is metal surfaces that have lost just enough material to rattle against each other under load. That is exactly the condition this chemistry was designed to reverse. If the knock screams at cold start but fades away as the engine warms up, going almost completely silent at full operating temperature, you are hearing carbon deposits with an early clearance issue underneath. The chemistry handles both. But if the knock showed up overnight, stays constantly loud whether the engine is hot or cold, and your oil pressure gauge is doing something erratic, stop. That is not microwear. That is catastrophic mechanical failure past the point of chemical intervention. No $3 bottle on earth is going to reverse a spun bearing. Know the difference before you open your wallet, because a mechanic certainly won't explain it to you before he opens his. Second, the oil condition. This is where people sabotage themselves out of pure laziness. They have oil that is 3,000 miles past due, dark as black coffee, loaded with acids and combustion residue, and they pour the additive straight in on top of all that garbage. What happens next is simple. Nothing. The ZDDP molecules need clean metal surfaces to bond to. Degraded oil coats your engine's internals with oxidation products that block the bonding sites. The chemistry only partially works. Partially is not what Aberdeen Proving Ground documented. Partially is how you end up spending $3, then $4,200 3 months later, and angrily telling yourself the additive was a scam. It wasn't a scam. You poisoned it with neglect. If your oil is overdue, change it first. Fresh oil at your manufacturer's specified viscosity. Then add the treatment to that fresh oil. Clean surfaces equal clean chemistry and documented results. Combined with a $3 additive, your total investment is still less than a standard diagnostic fee at any dealership. But you have to do it in the right order. Third, the ratio. 1 ounce of ZDDP additive per quart of your engine's total oil capacity. Not per quart sitting in the crankcase right now, per quart of total capacity listed in your owner's manual. A 4-quart engine gets 4 ounces. A 6-quart diesel gets 6 ounces. Do not eyeball this. Do not treat it like a cocktail and assume more chemistry means more protection. The bonding reaction physically saturates at the correct concentration. Anything beyond that just raises the phosphorus levels in your oil past the saturation point with zero additional benefit. And it brings a very real risk of poisoning your catalytic converter. Measure it, pour it into the cold engine, cap it. Fourth, the drive. This is where the entire protocol either works or fails. Within 24 hours of adding the treatment, you have to drive the vehicle for a minimum of 30 minutes. And at least 10 to 15 of those minutes must be sustained highway speeds under normal load. Not city crawling, not a grocery run, highway. This isn't arbitrary, it's thermodynamics. ZDDP only decomposes and releases its zinc and phosphorus compounds when the oil temperature exceeds 180 degrees Fahrenheit. That provides the heat. The load pressure on the bearing surfaces during highway speeds physically drives those compounds into the micro-wear scars. City driving gives you heat, but not enough pressure, so the reaction only happens halfway. Highway driving gives you both. That single 30-minute drive builds roughly 60% of the total protective glass layer. You won't hear total silence during that drive, but you will hear the knock change character. It shifts in pitch before it shifts in volume. That is the zinc iron phosphate glass forming inside the wear scars in real time. The remaining 40% fills in over the next 300 to 500 miles of normal mixed driving. Here is your exit clause, and I mean this quite literally. If you try this exact protocol and your engine knock does not measurably reduce within 500 miles, you have lost exactly $3. But you have gained the single most valuable diagnostic answer available to any vehicle owner. The absolute confirmation that your wear has crossed the line from a reversible chemical stage into irreversible structural mechanical failure. That $3 answer just replaced a $200 diagnostic visit that would have told you the exact same thing with less precision. You either fix the problem for $3 or you definitively confirm the problem for $3. There is no scenario where you lose. That is not a sales pitch. That is arithmetic. And if the knock does quiet down, you simply maintain the chemistry at every oil change, $3 per interval. That is your entire ongoing cost. No subscriptions, no aggressive dealership upsells, no premium VIP coaching program where someone charges you $49 a month to repeat what the U.S. Army published for free in 1952. $3 every oil change, for as long as you want the protection to regenerate. If you stop adding it, the layer still protects you, but it will thin gradually over time as the sacrificial surface wears away. Start adding it again, and the regeneration resumes. You control the switch, you always control the switch. That F-150 sitting at 310,000 miles in Louisiana, that is not a miracle. That is compound maintenance savings expressed over 122,000 miles of continued operation. Every single mile that truck ran past the point where 2 mechanics declared it dead is a mile where the owner's money stayed in his bank account instead of flowing into a shop's cash register. Multiply that reality by every vehicle you will own over the next 30 years. The number gets quiet and enormous in exactly the way that real financial survival always does. Not with a single dramatic windfall, but with thousands of small, expensive extractions that simply never happen.